Well, welcome back, guys. This is the first service since school has been out, correct? I'm excited. I'm glad to see you guys here. How many of you guys attended the out-of-school barbecue last week? So some of you, not all of you. We were missing a few. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a story tonight that you might know. How many of you guys are familiar with Samson? Samson. So here's the deal. What I want to ask you before we even get started is, what type of movies do you guys like? What kind of movies do you like? Horror movies, action, chick flicks, comedies, rom-droms, all those things, whatever they're called, whatever. Well, I will tell you that me personally, I am a fan of the suspense films, right? So those thrillers, those action films, those are the type of things that I'm into. There has to be a major problem that almost seems impossible for the hero or the heroes to conquer, for me to feel like I'm engaged in the movie. Anybody watch a movie where you're just like, man, this is not, like there's nothing good that's gonna come out of this, and you're cheering for the hero of the story, and you're hoping that they can win, but you don't see a way for that to happen? Anybody into those type of movies? That's one of my favorite types of movies, okay? But if you also ever watch any movie where the good guy maybe wasn't so good, or maybe like he wasn't super smart, and you're watching this, and maybe if you're like, when I go to the movie theater, sometimes I get that urge, like while I'm eating my popcorn and getting ready for the night, that I'm just ready to scream at them and be like, don't do that. Why are you doing that? Because we have the ability to look at the situation from the outside and see all the mistakes that they're already making before we get there. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to unpack Samson's story. So I'm going to ask that you guys carry with me, that you focus with me, that you stay with me tonight. I'm going to go real fast through his story, and I'm going to talk about some of the things about Samson's character, okay? So first we find out in Judges 13:1, the story starts like this. It says this: "And again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. So again, over and over, the Israelites, God's chosen people, go in and out of listening to what God has said for them and following his direction, and then say, you know what, maybe I don't need to do that anymore. Maybe I'm not about that anymore. And so they go and they do evil in the sight of the Lord, and every time God comes back and he lays down and says, well, you know what, if you're not listening, maybe I should get your attention. Here we go. You're going to be in captivity again. We're going to bring rulers into your life. We're going to take over the things that you feel like are owed to you are no longer going to be there. We're going to squash you. So for 40 years, the Philistines, who are an enemy of the Israelites, have them in captive. They were in a place where where they would follow God, and then they would fall back. And here's what happens. Right after this, an angel of the Lord comes to a couple that weren't allowed to have children. They weren't able to. They weren't in a place where they were able to have any children. And they said, listen, if you follow some simple rules, like if you don't drink wine or eat anything unclean, and never let a razor touch your unborn child's head, we're going to give you a son. And he will free you from the Philistines. And so back and forth in this story, they kind of go back and forth where Manoah, the gentleman, and his wife kind of doubt what's going to happen. They challenge it. They ask that God stay there. Then they recognize that it was a spoken word from God, and the angel of the Lord had come, and they immediately start following with God. Well, they say he grew into a young man blessed by the Lord. And in chapter 14, we see Samson grown up, and he goes into a city, and he sees a girl, that's a Philistine, and he says this: that's the one. Anybody been like, maybe I shouldn't ask this question, but I'm going to anyways. Anybody been somewhere, and you see somebody across the way, and you're like, I don't know anything about them, but I'm going to marry that one? Anybody felt that way before? Like seeing somebody across the way, that I would love to date that one. That's what Samson does. He doesn't even have communication with this girl. He's at the neighboring town. He sees this girl. He says, you know what? That's the one. I'm going to marry that one. So he goes back home and he tells his parents. And his parents, how do you think his parents reacted? No. What? Excited? Yeah, probably not. they were not super excited about this. The question was, hey, isn't there anybody that is an Israelite that you can marry? Anybody at all? Because what he's saying to them is, our family's arch nemesis is who I'm going to go marry. So I hope that's okay with you. And by the way, Mom and Dad, you go get her. So there's somewhat of an entitlement piece that is attached here. I feel like, if you were like, if I walked up to my dad when I was in high school and I'm like, I saw this girl at church. She's the one. Go get her for me. Don't you think that would be a really strange instance? So later on in the chapter, and it keeps on going like this, his parents are freaking out, right? But they don't know, and this is said in verses 14:4. It says this. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were all ruling over Israel. So even in this weird scenario where he sees the one, God is working. God has already blessed it. His family did not know that this was a plan of God's. And on the way to meet this girl, one of the cool things about Samson, I'm just going to preface this with you. I want you to visualize this as we walk, okay? So one of the cool things about Samson is that there's a lot of quick cuts of things that he does, okay? And it kind of wraps together and you kind of see the story unbuilt. But I want you to visualize this. They're walking down the road. His parents are ahead of him. He's walking and there's fields next to him. And all of a sudden, a lion jumps out. Rah, okay? There's a lion. He jumps out, right? And it says what happens to this lion is that with his bare hands, he grabs the lion and the strength of the Lord comes upon him and he rips it in half. Like a baby lamb, okay? So this is one of the situations where God's presence comes down upon him, and the Spirit of the Lord came into him, and he doesn't tell anybody. He doesn't tell anybody about this instance, and he just keeps going to the next town over, and he goes to meet this girl, and he actually finally talks to her and decides, you know what, this is the one. Yeah, we'll marry her. This is going to work. And so they set up a wedding. And inside that wedding, they decide that they're going to head back home. And during this time, it's a really interesting factor. It says this. On the road, he sees the dead lion, and he sees the bees, that bees have made a nest in it. And he reaches in, and he grabs honey out of that nest. How many of you guys have ever stuck your hand in a beehive? Why is their hands raised? This is wild. I've never done that myself, okay? I do not like getting stung by bees. I know Adam runs into them once in a while up in the trees. But me personally, I'm not interested in running into bees if I can get away with it, right? But he reaches inside an animal carcass and he pulls out honey. I don't know if you know, but that's not a common thing that happens, that bees do not make houses in dead carcasses, okay? And so what he does, he takes it out and he tastes it and he sees that it's good and sweet and he gives it to his family. Now remember, there's a promise that's attached to his code that his parents are not to eat things unclean, and I want you to pay attention to that. But as we go forward, it says this. We're now at his bachelor party, right? So we're rolling in. He's now walking up. He's got his bachelor parties. He's got all of his wife's friends are there. So these are enemies of his. They're there, and there's 30 guys there with them that they had picked to hang out with them. And basically, the translation comes out to be somewhat of a big party. Like a kegger, I don't know. It's crazy, right? It's wild. There's a party that's happening. And during this, in Judges, he says this, let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to this. If you can figure this answer out within 7 days of this whole feast, so his party was 7 days long, right? I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. So he's at this party, and it's crazy. And the first day, he says, well, tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. And he replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. And for 3 days, they couldn't answer. So they got a bet going. And these guys at the party get smart, and they decide that they're going to go over to his to-be wife and convince her to tell them what the answer is. That they're going to take his to-be wife, and she's going to bother Samson. That's what kind of happened. She says, don't you love me? Don't you care about me enough? Doesn't it matter to me whether or not you're hurting my heart? Why don't you just tell me the answer to this riddle? And she does it for 4 days straight. And so the fourth day, he tells her, and he says, this is what this answer is. And so the last day, the 30 men walk into them, and he says this, what's sweeter than honey and what's stronger than a lion? Now, this man just ripped apart a lion, and these guys come walking in all smug, and they're like, well, we have the answer. And he knows that his wife-to-be has told this answer. And he gets so angry that he calls his wife a heifer. No joke, he does. It's in the Bible. You can look it up. And he runs down to the neighboring Philistine town, and because he doesn't have 30 garments, this is what he does. He walks into the neighboring Philistine town, and he kills 30 men, and he takes all their garments off. And then he walks back and drops them off to all these guys. And he says, I've paid my debt, and now I'm going home. And his wife is left there to be given to another man. Now, he is supposed to be married to this person, and so later on in this story, he decides he wants to go back to his wife. And he heads up there, and her father meets him at the door, and he says, wouldn't you rather have my younger daughter? He said, no, my wife is here. And he learns that what had happened was that she was given to another man, and he gets angry again. And I don't know what your depiction of Samson is, but I think of like this. So some people talk about him being this huge man, and some people talk about a little, but this is like the Hulk smash moment, right? Like he gets angry and he's like, this is it, I'm coming in, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen next. And so he decides, he goes crazy, and he catches, this is one of my favorite parts. So I want you to visualize this. This is what, all the stuff that he does, this is part of the story that I really love. So if you're not listening to anything else, think about how crazy this would be, okay? He goes out and catches 300 fox. Ties their tails together by pairs, okay? Puts a lantern or basically a torch on the end of them, lights them, and lets them run through the field of the Philistines, and they burn up all their grain. How many of you have ever caught a fox? I don't believe you. Maybe. But I will tell you, 300 of them. Look at the dedication attached to how angry this man is. Right? And he sends them out in the field, and they burn down the field. And so the Philistines decide that they're pretty angry about the situation. It starts like they fight back and forth with Samson. He burns their fields. They go up and they burn his wife and her father and kill them. And that's it. And he finds out and kills a large number of Philistines. They don't say the exact number at this moment in time, but he goes and kills a large number of Philistines. Well, later on, the Philistines show up in Judah, and 3,000 men from, first Judah says to them, what are you guys doing here? And he said, don't you realize that you're governed by the Philistines? We need Samson. We just want Samson. So they take 3,000 men, and they load them up, and to take him to capture him. And he surrenders to the men as long as they can keep him alive. And when the Philistines show up after the men of Judah come to capture him. When this happens, they take him prisoner. He breaks free, grabs a jawbone of a dead donkey, and kills 1,000 men. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him again, and he kills 1,000 men. And then it says this, that he ruled Israel for 20 years. So, look, if we stop the story there, yeah, there were some faults in his story. There was some craziness there, but he was a ruler. He was the one that was a champion of the cause, right? And then he could have been just a great ruler, and that would have been the end of the story. But then, how many of you guys are familiar with Delilah? You know who Delilah is? Okay, so here's what happens. But then, Samson, in his need, first visits a prostitute, and the Philistines come to him and try to capture him in the night, and he breaks free, and then finds Delilah. Now, anybody ever watched a friend get in trouble because they were dating a girl or a guy that they know they shouldn't be dating? Anybody? I've seen it here. You don't have to be my friend to see this. I see it sometimes happen here where there is just a place where you're dating someone that is no good for you. It's a toxic relationship. It causes problems for you. It doesn't matter what it is, but both of you together are not good. I'm not saying that one or other are bad people, but you just realize that there's trouble brewing because of the relationship that you have. And see, every time that Samson got in trouble, it seemed like maybe there was a female involved. Could be a stronghold in his life. Could be an issue that he needed to pay attention to. See, as strong as Samson was, he still carried a lot of weakness. As strong as he was, as many times as God had come into his life and worked on him, there was a lot of weaknesses. And I want to finish up this story, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about his character, okay? I want to walk through this with you. In chapter 16, Delilah persuades Samson to share where his strength is from. See, what happens is she tries to trick him 3 times. Multiple times he tells her different things are where his power comes from. And then she'll say, "Oh, Samson." That's the way she spoke. I listened to the recordings. "Oh, Samson, the Philistines are here." And he would bust out and beat them all up. Every time. And she would trick him. And then she'd come back and be like, "Oh, you must hate me. You must." And she would nag on him, and she would work on him, and she would continue to make him feel like he didn't care about her. Until one time, he discloses that his power is from his hair. Like God said, and remember the beginning of the story, that no razor shall touch his head. That the power of the Lord came upon him because of the obedience attached to this. And so he passes out. And she has his head shaved. And she sells him out for 1,100 shekels of silver per each person that was trying to betray him. She has his head shaved, and then it says this in Judges 16 through 20. It says this, "Then she called Samson." Oh, I'll do it in my voice again. "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he awoke from the sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. Did you guys catch that? But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. And then the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles, and they sent him to the grinding grain in prison. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord. Okay? "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." And then he pushed with all of his might. And down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. I said this before, and I want you to think about this as we walk through this. Samson was a strong man full of weakness, right? What made him so weak? Well, I walked through and I read this, and I was thinking about this, and I was pondering, like, what kind of lessons do you get from this place? And I thought of 3 core principles that Samson struggled in. And places that, you read this story, you might not have incredible strength. Some of you may think that you have incredible strength, but not enough to tear down the pillars. The first thing I thought about, and Samson must have thought in his mind, was, I want it, so I should have it. When he looked at a girl and he wanted her, he should have it. He gets married and decides he wants to come back sleep with her, he should be allowed to. These are the things that he's thinking. He does whatever he feels like in his own heart. If he wants it, he thinks he deserves it. He's going to try to get it. And if anything gets in his way, he will destroy it. I want to ask you very clearly, is this something that you struggle with in your life? See, we live in a society, and I'm just going to be straightforward with you guys. We live in a society where a lot of times we feel like it's okay to want things, and it's okay for us to find whatever way possible to get those things. You want to feel loved? All it takes is a fleeting relationship. You want to feel accepted? All you got to do is push your own morals behind you. You want things? What stops you from stealing it? See, Samson, he slowly walked away from God. And I don't know if anybody has struggled with addiction or sin, but I'll tell you what, when I struggled with addiction growing up, it didn't start with me going and doing the hardest of drugs possible first. I slowly walked into that problem. I started with compromising my morals one time, and then another, and another, until I didn't feel it anymore. Those morals weren't feeling anything, weren't giving me a feeling anymore. I wanted something, so I decided I was going to go get it. And as he slowly walked over and over his thinking, he thought his own power was the reason why he was given his great strength. See, pride creates a mindset that you have to do it all by yourself. And I want to walk through something here for you. Do we understand that wants and needs are completely different things, correct? I might want really nice shoes, but do I need them? And at the end of the story, all of Samson's wants, all of the things that he struggled with, they seem trivial, right? All the things that he did would be considered trivial at the end of his story. Samson realized that he needed God, and he cries out this, and I want you to think about this. A man in the most desperate of moments in his life, hands on the pillars, waiting to go to his grave, he says, God, please remember me. Please remember me and give me strength one more time. See, our needs can turn us to God so he can meet us in our darkest moments. I believe that fully. But see, here's another character flaw that happens when we want something. We think that we deserve it, and so we decide that we're going to go try to take it. This is a hard one for me. Like I said, I'm a transparent speaker. I'm going to tell you straightforward how I feel. There are times that I work incredibly hard. There are things that I've done in my life that I feel like I am entitled to. Anybody else ever felt entitled to something? Ever been in a position where you don't get what you feel like you're entitled to, and then you're not grateful for those things, even if it was a smaller blessing? I do. I wrestle with that. I work hard, man. Like, I do a lot of stuff. And sometimes I forget to be grateful for where God lays me. I forget to be grateful for the season that God puts me in. And during that time, I think about how I'm owed some great debt. That I've done enough, that I've suffered long enough, that I've worked hard enough, that I've been a good person, that I've been through hard enough situations, that I've been obedient, whatever it might be, whatever I think the reason is that I deserve something greater. If no one's going to give it to me, if no one finds value in me, if no one feels like what my desires are worthwhile, then I'm going to go get it even if it's at the expense of others. And let me tell you, this is something that I see over and over in our culture. If I have to step on your head to get ahead, society says that's okay. What do you think? What I find interesting about this, about the deserving piece, is that we forget that there are things that we deserve that aren't good too. If the wages of sin is death, then why don't I deserve that? Of all the horrible things I've done in my life, even if I've been a good person, don't I deserve the other side of things too? If I've stolen, why don't I deserve to be locked up? If I have caused problems or caused issues for other people, why is that not weighed heavily on me? No, I'm just worried about what I think I deserve that is good, not what is bad. What we think we deserve reflects our heart, and I truly believe this. Samson thought that he deserved anything that he wanted, especially female companionship, and he was going to take it, and no man could stop him. And little by little, his heart stepped farther and farther away from God. His life didn't start with him blind and shackled to a grinding mill, but his actions did bring him there, and I want you to pay attention to that. He wasn't born with the idea that he was going to be locked up and blind. He was supposed to be a great conqueror of the Philistines. This is where he ended because of his actions, because of his heart, because where he thought he deserved something that he didn't. The last piece that I see Samson struggle with is this moment of, I can handle it because I'm stronger than the issue. See, Samson's pride made him fall, and the more he felt like he could handle it, the less dependent he was on God. And it slowly divided his character between his true purpose, which we talked about before, delivering from the Philistines, and what his pride was causing him to believe. And he slowly walked away from God, and over, he was thinking that his own power was the reason why he was given great strength, right? We had talked about that a little bit before. See, pride creates a mindset that you can do it by yourself. I remember when I was younger, there was people that would say things like, well, I'm going to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. Anybody know what that phrase means? I've heard some kids say, I can do it on my own. I don't need any help. I don't think that's the way that God designed us. And as much as I want to say that I don't struggle with pride, I do too. There are times that I just do not ask for help. See, we get this idea that we're the only ones that can handle it, or maybe the only ones that actually know what's going on in our lives. And our culture says, you're weak if you ask anyone else to step in. I remember the first time I went to a counseling session, I remember this moment of machismo came over me, right? I don't know if you guys know what machismo is. It's this macho nature in my life. I don't need any help. I don't need anyone to tell me anything about what's wrong with my character, what's wrong with me as a person, or what things that I needed to be helped through in my life. And I walked through that place in my life where my mindset was, even if you might know some of it, you haven't walked my story, so I'm just going to fix it myself. I don't need your help. And what happens with pride is it becomes really isolating and paralyzing. It becomes something that squashes you, and you become your own island, and no one else is allowed in. But you don't feel like you can get out either. And so as we get ready to close tonight, I want you to just close your eyes. I know that there are friends around you that might be a little bit distracting, be in a moment where I just need you to focus on you for a minute, okay? Take this moment to just think about these questions, to really reflect on your own walk, okay? You know, Samson's journey, when he first started, was blessed by God. And as time went forward, he walked slowly away from him. Where are you walking slowly away from God? See, whereas your pride deceived you into thinking that you can do it all by yourself. Where's that moment in your life that you know that God has given you a blessing? And I know some of you guys have shared this with me personally, that you feel like God has put a calling on your life, but it's been easy to step away from it or be distracted by it or be pushed back, or maybe you've been hurt or whatever else it might be. Where is that as the forefront of your mind? See, if Samson focused fully on what God designed for him, maybe his story would have been different. He was a great warrior with great weakness. You can be a great warrior too, and where is your great weakness? And I want you to really reflect right now. Where are you spiritually? Maybe God is just something that your parents talk about, or something that you don't really understand, but you know that we're here and we're a community that loves people, and that's why you show up. But if God came to you and said that you were anointed for something greater than what you are right now, are you willing to follow that, or are you willing to slowly walk away? That's a real question that I want you to carry with you tonight. Are you struggling with your own wants? Is there places where you think that you know what you want, but you haven't even asked God whether or not He wants that for you? See, like Samson, there are weaknesses in our lives, and God has blessed us with the ability to be forgiven for those sins and iniquities that we have caused against Him. The question is, are you ready to run with that and be anointed where He's leading you? That's the real question tonight. Samson failed, but is not a failure. Samson could have chose to accept his failure in his identity. He could have gave up, or given into his own past struggles. But instead, he turned to God, and he pled with Him, and he said this: God, do not forget me. And he stepped into a true moment of repentance. And so with all eyes bowed, I just want to ask you, is there a moment, is there something, in a weakness that you know, just hand raised, is there a weakness that you know that is holding you from God's blessing? If you have that, can you just slip your hand up? Because I want to pray for you tonight. I'm not asking to know all of what it is. I just want to know that I can pray for you. Thank you. You guys can put your hands down. I want to pray for you because I want to see God work heavily in your own hearts. See, the cool part about Samson's story is God saw his own failures. And in that moment while he was leaning on the pillars, he looked back at the timeline and saw all the things that he did before that made him fail, and still blessed him when he came back through repentance. So with all eyes bowed, eyes closed and heads bowed, God, I want to pray for this group here tonight. Lord, you know where our weaknesses are. You know in our heart where we struggle. You know there are times that we doubt, that we're prideful, that we deal with lust, that we deal with selfishness, and just live in a place where this world is so corrupt and it's easy to walk easily in that direction. And God, instead of us wandering away, I ask that you call us closer to you. That tonight that we're able to identify our weaknesses, that we repent of our weaknesses, so that we can go on and be great warriors. Lord, I lift this all to you tonight. In your name, amen. Guys, before we leave tonight, I just want you to really focus on his story. You know, this is like a movie, right? There's been TV shows, there's been plenty of things that have depicted Samson's story, and I often wonder if I believe that my God has the strength that He's given Samson in my life. Have I committed to that same strength where God has anointed him into my own life? And the Bible says that we have that ability to walk in the assurance of our salvation and to walk in our anointing. And I want to leave that with you as you go forward tonight. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for being here. I ask that the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. Amen.